Since you've placed a lot of thoughts about museums nicely in a plate, I would actually ask other three guests, what do you think about the museums? So museums now, museums in the future, how they should be? Do you share Karl's view on this? Or, yeah, I would ask this question to each and every one of you.
So, we work a lot together. We do exhibitions together and we also teach together.
Okay.
So, I think when we teach in this field of exhibition design, museums design, a lot of our students want us to tell how shall we do it. They want something like a receipt how to do it. And sometimes they are really not happy with us because we don't want to give them a receipt. But what we see when we are traveling around with our students or alone is, if I go to the museums in New York, in Berlin, in Lisbon, wherever, sometimes I completely mix it up because one museum looks like the other, the next, and also in this museum there are always the same artists, always the same works, and this is something really boring. And the students want to make it as beautiful as there. And I think this is completely the wrong way, and so I think this is really important. Also in the project Karl showed us to experiment something new. And if you do something new, not everything is perfect. We have also the risk that it is not perfect, but I think we should risk it. But most of our students, they want the right way, and they're afraid of having risk. And also most of the museums directors are also a little bit afraid of taking a risk.
I will take 2 steps back. This is tightly connected to the fact that museums need to change. So museums are tightly related to the societies, and the societies constantly change. And also museums need to respond to these changes of the societies with changing in the museums. And now here's a question of the role of the curators. This is completely non-professional or non-scientific noticing, but I think curators are afraid to change or to make changes or to be daring. So how do you look on the role of the curators? Both of you.
I studied, my origin in education is history. I studied contemporary history, and I worked about 20 years as a historian in research projects and teaching at the University Graz. But because I couldn't get a job, it was always projects, I came to work with exhibition design, but not with design before. I was something like the storyteller, the researcher who is producing the story, and then you give this material, the objects, to a designer. And when I started this, I really thought that people like Erika, they are my slaves, you know, because, you know, I know everything about history. I'm so cool, because, you know, it was at that time when you really thought you're researching the truth, you know. But as we know now, I don't believe so, not so much on truth. I know that, what I say, we have different realities to look to history, and you should show that. And I really thought I have to tell the story, I have to choose the objects, and people like she only is like really like a slave who take the vitrine and take the object there and make a nice graphic design. But of course in the last years I saw that design is really important. And what designers are doing, and maybe this is the speciality between us, because we did a lot of projects together, and I am responsible for the content, and Erika is responsible for the aesthetics and the design and the scenography. And so we switch a lot and we discuss a lot. So she's allowed to say to me, go away with your silly objects. You cannot show them to people, they are only flat, you know. Please bring me better objects. And I'm shocked. And I said, this guy, this is crazy, yeah? I am the researcher, you know. She says, go away with the objects. But I know that, and this I really like when we are doing exhibition, the exhibition design is for me a process where you look for, I would say, aesthetic synonyms, aesthetic metaphors for the content. And if you have a good exhibition design, it can tell you so much on an aesthetic, on an emotional way about what you want to communicate. And I know now, if we start a project, and this is really important, we really start together. I don't take the designer half year later. We start together the process from the beginning. This is so important. Yeah? And the better they design, the less you need texts, declarations and so on, because design is really very important and in this world especially. So I think my role changed a lot in the last 30 years when I think on the first project, and we start and we don't start as two persons. I often take a theater player, a regisseur from the theater, because they think in a different way. And I also ask my friend who is a medicine doctor, because he's just a clever guy, and he doesn't think like we think, but he knows a lot about life, because he deals a lot with ill people, and he knows more about life as maybe I know. And so we have a big mix of people, and this is really great to work with.
I would maybe go to Boštjan now.
Yeah.
First of all about the museums, and then immediately after that, you come from the field of design. And there's a tiny little war going on, not really a war, but between designers and curators. There's always this tiny fight, who is supposed to follow whom. So you found a really wonderful and smooth solution between you two, because you work together tightly from the beginning and you both have experiences from each other's fields. But how would you see it in Slovenia? Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, first of all, thank you, Karl, for the presentation. How to react from this new, a little bit tiny and stupid world. So I think that these two questions we can merge it, because somehow it's not important from what kind of field you come, because, for example, my basic vocation is I'm a graphic designer from the field of editorial graphics, so I'm a bookmaker mostly. And of course that means that I work in a team. So for me the team is not a team of designers, but the team of different professions. So that means that I must know what is going on in the relation of the content which we work on. So it's also approach that we start in the initial point. So I must say that it's also when we work in the architecture, we need to, as a designer of the public space, we need to be part of the project in the really initial points. So that's why it's not like a form of a facade or in form of some curtain which is take place in the last minutes of the presentation of the project. So that's why how to create the conflict between different professions and types. I think that there's just a story about the selfish form of the personalities, and that's all.
Ego.
Ego.
Very common.
Yes. So that's fine. But when we talk about the museums, I think that if I can compare the structure of the school, the idea of the modern, or maybe just the school of nowadays, it means that it can be the same approach. So it must be I don't know, not dark. Must be very the students must laughing. The relations between professors and staff must be very orientated into the new approaches, new stuff, new forms of creativity, and that's why I think that's the same when you come to the school. It's like you present the idea of the area, but in your own way. Area as a profession, as a field of the culture and everything. It's part of that.
Okay. Thank you. May I add a slight change to the question for Ms. Širok? So how does actually the National Museum of Contemporary History respond to the demands of the public? I know there are a lot of collaborations with different institutions, like there are collaborations with ALUO, there are collaborations with other museums, other abroad partners. We also try to do something together with the public. So what are the solutions that you see on the field of museums to make them more, as Karl said, let's say surprising, funny, and more to produce people that are smarter, not more educated?
I will try. I just have to add something about what you were talking about. I'm the third partner. I'm the one with the money. So no one wants to collaborate with me, but they all depend on me. So yeah. So I'm the one who's saying, yeah, cut the money, because it's true. In the last, I think, less than 5 years, oral budget is probably more than half cut off for all the exhibitions. So I'm the one who's saying to the one who are producing texts that they are too large and too big, and that they really need to make it shorter. And especially you will see a difference between the curators who are working all their life in the museums and the people from the academia who are invited to work on one thematic exhibition, because they are not able to produce small texts. For them, a small text is 1 page. And you know that when you are going to a museum, you are not going to read a page when you are entering into an exhibition. You will just, turn and go out. So, yeah. And on the other side, I would say from my perspective, I'm the one who is also trying to connect not just the curator and the designer. And here we are lucky because we have the designer in the house. It means that she needs to be here 8 hours per day in order to work with us. It's not that we are meeting and collaborating. She's here in her office. I'm trying to include more and more also the pedagogical stuff, because you need at the same time when you are producing the exhibition also to include all the elements for the schools, because we are depending from the schools. And another element which is becoming more and more important, and we were not able to see it in the past, which is accessibility. So from our side, it's luckily we have her, and she's really becoming a strong factor in order when we are producing an exhibition to say, this is not okay, there's no mobility here, the letters are too small. So Urša is really helping us, and it's working a lot with new ideas how to make accessibility of the exhibitions to different groups. Not only from the physical side, but also to include the groups which were not included so much into the as visitors of the exhibitions. And of course what we are working on is this participatory element, which of course no one knows what it is, but everyone is talking about. And yeah, what we are trying to do is to make it much more, at one side, easier to understand, and on the other side, to enlarge the topic, not to talk, let's say, I'll talk about the exhibition that we have right now, Coming Home. We didn't want to make an exhibition about the Second World War because everyone was expecting from us to do an exhibition about the Second World War. So why to talk about pain and what happened? Try to put it from the other angle, and what happens when you survive the war and you have to rebuild your life. And you are, I don't know, somewhere around the world and you need to come back to the place that you call home. So Ulysses was not just a fiction from the antique times, it was something which was going on in a century ago in, maybe more than 20% of the world population. So we tried to put another story. And of course the design is very important. You need to attract, and at the same time with the text you don't want to scare people. So yeah, there are all these layers that, and of course we could do it better, we know, but it's also a problem of money. So you are getting more and more creative, trying to do it and to take again the things that you already throw somewhere away and you just have to reuse it back. So yeah, I think we want museums to teach us, but not to be teacher, to amuse us, but not in a way that you are pushed to be amused, and at the same time, of course, we need the humor. Yeah, even if you are talking about very, very tragical things and atrocities, especially when you're talking about this museum, you also need the humor. Because people were using the humor to survive. Yeah.
Okay, so we have very high demands from museums. I don't know how you feel about the museums. I kind of share your ideas and demands. I would step back now a bit to the design, and if I read correctly, and you can correct me anytime because I'm no expert in this field, information design. This could come quite handy when talking about museums, because if I understood correctly, information design is something that helps us, the regular people, when we enter the museums or anywhere, that the information reaches us as target public at its top potential. So we get the clear, clean and very efficient information very quickly. Is that correct?
Yes.
Something like that. So can you see the museums are, how are your experiences? Are museums lacking of that capability to get as much as possible from the information design and design when producing the exhibitions to make it more clear, more attractive, more efficient?
I think this is getting better.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And you have with new media, you have a lot of possibilities. And what I really like is that you must not put all the information in one room. You mustn't stuff it in one room. You can take it with you, maybe with a mobile phone or from the internet. Yeah? So you can have a very different plateaus of information. Like if there's a specialist, you can have everything. But you can have it on you can really switch with the different levels. This I really like very much. And but on the other side, the older I am, the more conservative I start to be. And because I work a lot with computers, and I don't like so much new media in exhibitions, too much, because it's I do it in all of my time. It's with computers. And social media I use, and I like I like the museum maybe also as sometimes as a space of silence. Maybe you mustn't have power all the time with the sound design and everything. And it's like in the old like the museum. Yeah.
Would you like to add something?
Yeah, maybe if we speak about the information design, because it's some kind of tool that's just the layer of info and everything, but it's not. It's mostly interpretation of the content, which means that the content is. You must talk about the content when you talk about the form of information design, or maybe the language of information, which is we are again in the initial point that the team is part of the result. Then where is the user experience? So who will be the reader of that? So that's are the parameters of then after also aesthetics. That's why.
So basically cooperation since the beginning in thought of the visitor in their minds. Multidisciplinary cooperation from the beginning.
I think what is very important, I often would like to have more courageous,
Yes.
with questions maybe also they have. And if there is not important questions, I as a designer can illustrate it, but it never will become very astonishing. And this is, for me, this is the most important problem. That there is not a good structure in the content, and also the content itself is not very interesting. And in an exhibition, very often there is a lot of completely useless information. And this useless information in exhibitions makes it boring. Nobody wants to read the material of this painting. Why should I read it? Maybe I'm interested in why did the painter do it. But there are a lot of garbage in the information. And I can do it beautiful, but it doesn't mean anything.
The point with information design, the very important goal, I think, is that we now are in a time with a lot of information overload. Yeah? Because I remember when I did my dissertation between 1979 and 1981, yeah, I did research about a very small part of my home country, about working class movement in the 19th century. Yeah? And you know, my dissertation father said to me, you have to, if you write a dissertation, nobody else could find any more as you did, because it was the time when to start research was, where do I get the information from? Yeah? Yeah? And you had to, and then you had to find it. And now it's an overload, and now you have to choose which information I want to communicate, like you said. Yeah. So it's the really important is to take to information design. I would say it's the communication of messages with a aesthetic ways. Yeah. This is information design, and to choose. This is very important to choose the most important facts. And maybe I should tell the story from last week, because we have been in excursion with our students in Detroit, yeah? And we have a very nice school there. It's called the College of Creative Study. It's a really very rich institution, yeah? It's in the old Ford building located, and they have equipment you can start to cry.
Space.
But the students are coming from China, you know, and India, and they had very good money from the parents, and they pay a lot of money to study there. And then there was a workshop with an ex-student about interaction design, and this was, I think, this is exactly what we have to talk about. He made a workshop about interaction design, and we were watching the presentation of the student works which they did after 3 days work. And it was really nice because you could see a wall with pins on it, and there was light and it looked nice. But then
The colors was changing.
colors were changing. But then Erika said to me, do you know what this is about? Yeah. What does this guy what do they want to tell us? What is the story? There was no story, it was just color. And that's really important. It's the story. The story is important. So I always say, for me as a historian, history is a good study to explain the world. Yeah.
Well, my next question actually just builds up on top of this one. Museums are somehow facing towards the public nowadays because we all realize this is where we have to turn to the people, and we have some bumps on the road there. And I was wondering if it's possible that the design could be like a bridge between this, because museums are not seen, at least in Slovenia, I don't know, I think it's similar in Austria, museums are not really cool. So people don't really, especially the younger people who are free of the educational system, do not really enter them freely or regularly because there are a lot of other things to do. And the design things are perceived as cool at the moment, especially in Slovenia. So could this somehow bridge the gap in between to connect the museum's design and people, especially the younger people? No.
The content is it.
The content.
Yeah. She said that the youngsters are not coming to the museum because they must do other things. Can they can do these things here in the museums? Okay. So it's part of the presentation, part of the exhibition.
I think for young people it's really important to have good teachers, really, to infect them with that they like those kind of stuff. We can see it because we got students, and sometimes it's really crazy because some of the design students they know nothing about art. Yeah? Some of them, and some of them are really very educated, and you see it's all the work of engaged teachers in the high school.
I have just one fresh experience. I'm mixing of excursion with the students to Milan last week, and not in the expo, really just other things. So side exhibitions.
Prada.
Of course, Prada and Triennale, Milan, and so on. But we find a lot of difficulties in when we visited the new Museum of Design, Museo di Design in Milan, which is just a boring exhibition of the chairs from 1880 to 1980, with nothing, just I don't know. Also the light was bad. Because you don't, it's not when you made the photo are not yet well because the light is so boring. So I think without any story, just some kind of centuries trip to between the chairs with very new house in the south of Milan, and I think with a lot of recommendations from the stars of design, which is presented in the information graphics, which means that I think that design would not be part of the presentation in that way. So design or visual communication, it's part of the content, which is not just an object form of that. So it's very important that the content can be the real relation between today's and future's form of education and way of life. That's why I think that also the students have is really good approach to that, and really criticize that part of the exhibition. So we then go to repeat something very well, and then it becomes a really good event on that.
To refer a bit back, when you said that museums are many times for the elites, for the people of high education, high standard. Well, that's the question for everyone. Did you notice that museums tend to present like a dominant narrative, one dominant narrative that is most accepted in the society they live in? And is there any possibility, or do you have any suggestions how the objects could be presented in a way that any person who would enter the museum could relate to them, could find a piece of something in that object, that they could see it as an object that tells a story of them, or a story that they can understand or take home or think about it later. Yeah. Suggestion?
I don't know, would you have time maybe for some photos again? Because we could show, we would like to show maybe two short projects, or is the time
How
bad?
long?
No, just
Sure.
because this is a project which I think would be very interested, because it's a, just a moment.
Mountain of Memories.
Yeah.
I think the Mountain of Memories is a good example.
That was also my question.
And I think with...
So maybe you can tell me.
I can tell.
Yeah.
In 2003, Graz was European Capital of Culture, and there we did inside the mount in the center of Graz an exhibition about the memories of the people of Graz, the Mountain of Memories it was called, and there we showed stories and objects the people of Graz brought us. And I had some really, if you do it well, it was really hard job and so on. And then I had some moments I was happy with it.
Okay.
For example, it was 12 years ago, I saw some immigrants in the exhibition. And I never saw immigrants in an exhibition before. It was really astonishing to see people, black people in an exhibition. And I thought, okay, we did a good job.
Yeah, just a few photos. This was the Mountain of Memories, the Berg der Erinnerungen. And this was a project in 2003 in the culture capital. And you know, the culture capital in Graz was a good year because we had a lot of people going there. And this project was something like, I would say, yeah, it was their participation project. Because the organization committee, they were a little bit afraid with the public because they said they spend so much money for very high culture, but they wanted to do us one project which is participation project. And the goal was they wanted us to do a exhibition about the life of the people in Graz in the 20th century. Yeah? And what we did in the first step, we said, let's do it in newspaper, ask the people to bring memories about their life in our office of memory. And here you can see one of our team, Heimo, he did he was in the office, and these two women came there and brought us some objects. And what we did in the first collecting phase, first we asked people to bring objects, but this didn't work so much because maybe 10 came and then it was done. But then we also went to the houses of the people, yeah? Like I had about 30 people, students and culture historians working with me, and they really met people at their home, but really many people they visited. And yeah, this was the material, and we collected in 5 months, or 3 months or 4 months, we collected 20,000 objects. And no objects from a museum, really new objects, which people have at home. Of course, photos a lot, yeah? And we didn't collect the objects, we did it in a digitalization, yeah? In an archive.
Also the story about it.
Yeah, and also a story, but no object without story. And here you can see, maybe if you know Graz and you have this mountain, and they wanted to have the exhibition in the mountain because there was a system of tunnels which is done by working slaves in the war, Second World War. It was people who went in prison from other armies, yeah, and they had to work in the tunnel. It was really a very bad work, and the tunnel was at that time to Graz people went there if the bombers arrived. Yeah? And here are some of the objects. This is from the 50s trouser, which they don't like to wear because it was in a very bad material. Or this was Erika got it from a restaurant in the center of Graz, which doesn't exist anymore. But if anybody of the youth of Graz didn't want to go to school, he went to this restaurant, to this coffee house, and played schach instead of going to school. Or this one is a demonstration against nuclear power station. Here you see a guy with a harmonica, and here you see the original harmonica. We asked him to give it to the exhibition. Or this teddy bear. This teddy bear normally it's nothing without story because here's a teddy bear too, But this teddy bear, he was in the tunnel system in 1943 sometimes, because the owner was a girl with 3 years old, and when the bombers came, they went into the tunnel system to be safe, and she took, of course, the teddy bear with her. And then it returned 50 years later for the exhibition. This is, I think, a really nice story. And this object, I think, this is really important, because what we said, let's take objects from daily life. And this is my best object, because this object is from my friend, the one who is a medicine doctor, very humanistic doctor. But this doctor was engaged in the 1977 in the anti-nuclear movement in Graz, and he went there to affiche posters against nuclear power station. And we took his pot with a brush, and then it's the work of Erika. Erika, her job was to give something around which puts an aura to daily simple objects. So, vielleicht ist das selber sagen? She used the cubes, these cubes, like because cubes are
Euclidic.
Euclidic cubes, like flying like associations through the air.
And it isolates the memories, because each memory is unique, and so each object was in one of these cubes together with the story.
And she put also one color, so it starts to be a little bit colorful, and with a light, and she needed the light because it was so much humidity, about 98% or so, and with the light, the humidity was gone away. Yeah? So it's a good system. Yeah? And why we couldn't use normal vitrines, yeah? Because it's it's a mountain, and this would we tried before, but it looked crazy, and so she invented a system to put the cubes with the metal on the wall, yeah, and it's really like you will see, yeah, yeah.
Excuse me, what's going on today with this? Is it still going on, this project?
That's a sad question. After the exhibition, she was open 6 months and then a 7th month because people wanted to go still. And it was very crazy because we had also a lot of Slovenian people coming there, and they also liked the exhibition because it was like a daily objects about the life of the normal people. And so, like, life in Slovenia is not so different to Austria. And you could have in the exhibition a really discussion between the people, looking at the object and association and then discuss. And then we wanted it to give it to the Stadtmuseum, the city museum, but they say, we don't care, we are not interested in. And then we need 1 year that they even took our database, and it was the Universalmuseum Ioneum, my friend Wolfgang Muchic, the director, took it. Yeah? And then they had for some years like an office of memories in the museum, but in the last years it was, it doesn't work anymore. Yeah?
Do you know the Museum of Broken Relationship in Zagreb?
Yeah. I haven't been there, only my wife, but she bought me some...
It's very similar story, but there from the project it became one of the most successful museums in Croatia, or even in...
And we also had a very funny art installation because we are now living in a very interesting society, I say post-modernity, and a lot of things changed in this time. I don't believe anymore on the genie, yeah? So in art you work in collaborations, yeah? And also with music and art, it's a lot of I would say remix project, yeah? So you remix old history, yeah? Also in art, in music, it's the DJs, yeah, or the VJs. And we invited a band from Great Britain, Cold Cut, yeah, to work with our material. They came in our office and they took all the media material, the movies, and start to remix it. And this was really funny because they made an installation with about 24 sensors on the floor, and if a school class came, you could dance, and you had this projections, and with this system you could dance in history. And the best was they changed the picture. And we had a photo from Adolf Hitler, and if you did like that, he was gone out of history. This guy was great. Yeah, this was this project, and I think it was really important how to present it, yeah, and I think the success was that the people did really like it with 100,000 visitors, yeah, and the funny thing was we presented parts of the history which are normally not in the history books, like the history of the women movement, yeah? Or the history of anti-nuclear power movement, or the history of homosexuality in Graz, the history of squatting houses. We have 7 squatting houses not projects, actions, but they all, police took them away. And so it was something like a history of...
Not only this,
Yeah.
I think normally, also this was not a generic story about this, but it was individual story of people which were member of this. And you never tried to speak about the component of these houses, but it was this story, this story, this story. And all the other people were reading or looking at it, reading the story or looking at it, and they started to think about their own story and their connection. And this was also the reason why the people started to speak with each other. People which never met before,
Yeah.
they started to speak, because it was not a general stories, but it was only individual stories.
How big was it in square meters?
It was not many square meters, I think 800, because we had all these tunnels, and it was like a labyrinth.
But it was
How
a
many
lot to
objects
see.
did you
Uh,
present?
2,200.
But how come that no museum in Graz takes it? I mean, continues.
Because of what I said before. No? That's really... We have a catalog, that's nice. I think I sent it to you. Did I? No? Okay. And maybe at last, this project, because this was also like participation, and this was an experiment, and they really hated us. It was the first time in my life that I woke up after the opening at 4 in the morning, yeah, and I went out to take the Catholic newspaper and read it, what they read about our exhibition. And normally this guy who wrote the article is very slow in writing, you know. He needs 3-4 weeks to write the article. But in this case, the article was ready.
Next one.
And he said, this exhibition, forget it. Yeah? It's the worst
2
exhibition
pages.
ever. Yeah? 2 pages. Yeah?
Big headlines.
Okay, and we had a party in the last night, so I went back to bed and said, okay, my career is destroyed. Yeah? Okay. And the project was in 2009, and it was a project about 40 years Woodstock Festival. Yeah, the reason to do such project was we had at that time a social democratic governor for culture. Normally drives with Harley Davidson with long hair. No? And he said, I want the museum to do this exhibition. And the museum said, no, we hate the topic. We don't do it. Yeah? And then they asked me to do it. Yeah? And of course, it's fun. It's a nice, interesting question. And we started it. And what you can see here is the very famous old Joanneum in Graz. And we had this first installation from an artist group. You know the artists, of course. It's monochrome. Okay. Yeah? And it was from them. A big joint, 8 meters. And we were discussing before, we said we don't want this joint, you know, because it's usually to smoke joints without a problem. Nobody will cry about that. But in the first night they killed it, yeah, with a knife. And it was like, yeah. First night, yeah, but a good newspaper. And also with this, okay, you know what it means. Yeah, but with this joint we had a big troubles because this guy from the politics, this Social Democrat, we have a very bad newspaper in Austria. It's called the Kronenzeitung. It's a really very bad newspaper. And this newspaper wrote, because they found that young guy dead from heroin, yeah? And they said, the politician, it's his fault that this guy had died because of this joint, you know. And this guy was called Kurt Flecker, and in the newspaper wrote the Hashish Kurt, yeah, you know. Hashish Kurt. Yeah. And he went to the courtyard and said, I don't want to, that the newspaper speaks about me like that. And we were
Testimonials?
Sorry, testimonials. And you know, at the courtyard they said to me, they don't believe me that I, by myself, decided to put this joint without asking the politician.
It was the choice of the artist, to be honest, and we knew it, of course.
And we said, of course, it's we. We accepted it, and not the politician. The politician saw it at the opening. Yeah, and he lost the process, yeah? Because the Kronenzeitung is very, yeah? They had a very good lawyer. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, and here you can see the system. What we did at this exhibition, we said, you know, it's 40 years after Woodstock, and normally people, I'm too young for Woodstock in my age, but there are a lot of people, for them it's like, you know, if people were in war, they sometimes celebrate the war, yeah? Like we were the heroes, and the same is with this, yeah? There are people, they say, hippie time, it was so funny, yeah? Let's do it. And we said we don't want to have nostalgia from that side. And so we said, like it was at that time, never trust somebody about over 30 years old. So, I was the oldest one. Yeah, but we only used for the work people under 30. So
we invited 200 young artists under 30 to realize all the objects we showed in the exhibition. And also not objects they had, but they had to produce these objects for the exhibition.
Like an installation, huh?
And of course these artists were not famous artists, they were young people. And also they didn't see Woodstock in a way the old guys wanted to have it seen.
And I did the concept because I was watching the movie I think 3 times, because the goal with Woodstock is that, as we know now, this festival I think it really was boring. Because like the guitar player of Jefferson Airplane, one of the bands, said, if you have been in Woodstock and you tell stories about Woodstock, that's not the truth, because all 300,000 people, they were all the time on drugs. And nobody can remember what really was on. Yeah? Yeah? And so, like we know we are in a media society, the story of Woodstock is made by the movie Woodstock. Yeah? So this 3 hours movie, this tells the story and produced the story of Woodstock. So I watched it.
Produced the mythos about Woodstock.
Like a myth. Yeah? And I filtered about 15, 16, 17 topics like love, peace and happiness, concerts, drugs, rock and roll. Yeah? I took this from the movie, and then we invited for each room young designers to design the room, and we did interviews with about 44 people, I think, young and old one, to ask them if Woodstock is still in their mind, yeah? Also for the young people. And like this guy is he looks like
Janis Joplin.
Huh?
Janis Joplin.
Yeah. In fact, he's a heavy metal group singer and guitarist, yeah? But he also is doing in, you know, this. There are some people who go in the wood to play some mystic games. Yeah? He's one of them. But he's also doctor of physics, and he works at the Technical University in Graz. So, yeah, and we made an interview. My team made an interview. The young people made an interview with him. Or this Eva is now doing a very famous VJ festival in Vienna, yeah, the Sound Frame Festival. She invented it by herself, and we interviewed her because we were looking for people who are doing the Utopia, who lived at Utopia. Yeah? She studied art history and then went to Vienna, and she's living her Utopia. Or this guy is he was in a Maoistic organization in 69. He's a railway worker from my hometown, Max. Yeah, he's now in retiring, and he always, his life was very proud. Yeah? And he lived for the rights of the workers. And so we invited him because one room was protest. Yeah?
But no one of these people have been in Woodstock.
Yeah, of course, but yeah. And they were presented in each room 4 or 5 people with a very big and very nice photo. Like you see here, the photos are really, they put the people in a good light. Yeah? Yeah? And then the young designers designed this room, like this is the anti-society, people who don't want to be in the society like artists, and you have the same now than 40 years ago. There are some people who don't want to be commercialized. They are guitarists, they are musicians, they don't want to be integrated in the system, like 40 years ago. Yeah? And we had in each room like a timeline to show what's happening around, from international and Austrian. Yeah? And this is the room Freedom. It's like here, yeah? Because Austria, it was really a very dumb atmosphere in the 60s. I could tell you so bad things when I was educated. We had, because I'm from a worker town, and after the World War, they put all the Nazis in our town to the gymnasium. So I had all fucked up Nazi teachers. And till I was 14 years old, they really were terrible. And then we said to them, but it was really, really hard time. Yeah? Nobody can understand like it's now. Or this is also an art installation I like very much about, because at that time, for free women, they didn't use brass. Yeah? And this is an installation from one of
our ex-students.
Yeah, ex-students. And she said, I like brass because it's aesthetic. Yeah? Or this is very nice. You could go on this, yeah? And it's called break on through to the other side, like the doors. Yeah? And this is what young people think about free love. They think on sex with plastic. And we were not amused.
No, I didn't like this.
But you know, you cannot invite people in a project about free, and then you say, no, this is good, this I take, this not. And that was maybe, this was the reason what we respected. Yeah?
And it was so astonishing also for us what the young people did.
And very nice project. It's a 4 meter long. These trousers, you know. This was also a very strange installation. It was from a young girl from Vienna, an artist. She came there. She is a punker. She came with her 3 dogs, and she stayed for 3 weeks in the exhibition.
And her dogs.
And her dogs, and then she built this installation. Yeah.
How many rooms were there?
I would say 20.
So, and each one was a different installation?
Yes, yeah. A different installation, portraits of 4 people with one table with objects. They have to choose. And this timeline. Yeah. This is at the opening, and very funny. Also today we have communities in the countryside, and we invited one of the community to present themselves in an art installation. Yeah, very nice. And it's like time wouldn't stop. Yeah, 40 years before. And this is an installation about the importance of traveling. Yeah. India, a project with people who use old skates, yeah, and renew it with very nice illustrations. Some views. This was also a very interesting installation. One artist built big puppets, and he made an interview with a family with a big drug problems, yeah, nowadays. And it was like they speak with each other about what to do with the daughter, because the daughter is in a very bad mood. And of course you have to have a program, music. This is Saul Williams. It's a very nice, it was a very nice opening concert. And we had a very funny project. It's called the longest protest song of the world. And there were people traveling through our countryside asking young people, old people, what they would like to change in the world. And then this heavy metal band played 4.5 hours, were shouting these interviews into the public. Very crazy. Yeah? And you know, do you know this place? I showed you a photo of this nice place. Here? No, it's not here. You remember? Where I told you about the boy, and it's the Ernährungsquota, yeah? It was the, before the renovation, because after our exhibition, they made a big change, and now it's this clean space with no life in it, yeah? And here was a project from a community from Graz. They did very nice alternative projects. It was really a lot of fun, yeah? Yeah, okay.
So I would say if the design is not the bridge, then the artist could be a bridge to somehow take the content and make it in a different way. Is that, yeah?
Sometimes I think for exhibitions, you can really use contemporary art in a very good way. I don't want to show you another project, no. But we did a big project about 15 years ago about traffic. Yeah? And traffic, I first thought it's a really boring topic, about cars and locomotives and so on. But you can tell a lot of stories around. Yeah? And the funny thing is, when we started the project, everybody of you is expert with traffic, because you go, you have a car, you fly, you go by ship, you know everything. And so we said, how can we bring in the social, the cultural factor in this? And then I invited Stella Rollig, do you know her maybe? She's the curator of the Landhaus in Linz. We have a very nice art museum, the Landhaus. It's a very nice building and very nice art to go there. And she was not the director at that time, but I knew her as a very good curator of art. And I said to her, would you like to join our project? And can you bring me 30 artists with their art to put in the exhibition, not in one room, but like an object. And we had really nice art objects which can tell you about society so much better than, sometimes better than a text. Yeah? And so we used contemporary art as a tool to give something like Sylvie Fleury with she's designing these rockets made of like a teddy bear. Fur. So it's really a condecoration of the phallus, yeah. Or we used a Porsche made out of beton, yeah. Concrete, yeah. 13 tons. At Porsche, people were like, oh, what's going on? It's a normal. It's a yeah. But this is so. This could be a good way not to be like a teacher, like a bad teacher.
since we are quite long, does anyone have any questions, comments?
It sounds very interesting what you are doing, but in the beginning you started to talk about museums, and I think that the term museum is in 23rd century it became somehow problematic, you know, because there is a whole evolution of museums, and today you have so many different kinds of museums. So some experts they are looking for a new term.
You have one?
No. Because you have still, I don't know, the art galleries, which are crowded.
Yeah.
If you go to Florence, you know, so people are looking, or people are looking maybe just for the object, like Mona Lisa or something like that, or David.
But really crowded are the big museums in the big cities where there's a lot of tourism.
But then at the end it's just to say I've been there.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
If you're going to the Louvre, you see people really, when it's open, they run to the Mona Lisa. Yeah? This is really crazy.
Most of the rooms are empty.
Yeah.
Also.
But it's not that simple. I agree with all you said,
Yeah.
but at the end I miss maybe a debate about the quality. Because the quality and authentic is something that me as a not museum guy is searching for. You know? So I think that the difference between museums and museums is exactly the quality of something is presented there, and that's where design has a lot to do with. So I think that the museums that are good are just not good enough anymore, you know, because I want to go to excellent museums. So I don't visit the good ones anymore because it's so many of them.
Maybe it's just the way of interpretation, the way you, I don't know, place the object into a room or exhibition or whatever. So, I don't know. You can tell different, you can tell the same story in different ways. Yeah.
Or maybe that you offer the possibility to experience, to do something, to be active. Maybe this is also one part of this story.
What I still like doing exhibition is that each project is another project, and you don't do the same thing again. Yeah? This is really interesting, and it's also important, which we didn't talk, is in which space the exhibition happens. Yeah? Because this is really very important.
And also the form of, or maybe the environment of the society, which is influenced into the identity of the museum. So it's not just some kind of form of the museum and you spread it all over the world. It means it's also the identity of the community that is part of that. Like the airports, of course. It means it's all over the same, but it can be the future of that. It's also take the identity of the part of the society which is part. I think it's important of that. So it's not just the content of it, it's also the part.
So
the
that
content.
it's not isolated.
Yeah.
It's a nice field of work. But what I have to tell you is when we started with this master program exhibition design, we started it about 8 years ago, I think, and it was the Museum of Graz, Dr. Muric. He came to me and he said, "You are doing so fine exhibitions. Why don't you develop a study program? Museum and exhibition studies was the first name." Yeah? And then it was a hard way to get it accepted, because there was where we I have to ask, and where we have developed it, there was in another town in Krems, they wanted to have the same. So the guy in the commission was against us, and he said it's a very boring concept. But after 1.5 years, they accepted us, yeah, with what was really hard job. And then we started the study program, and after 5 years, I think, we recognized that our students normally do not get a job in a museum. Yeah? Because like in Graz, it's they don't want their own designer. Yeah? They want to change their designers. They want to take famous designers. Yeah? So they invite, like last time, Hage Merz to make the natural art department. Yeah? And they don't want to have a fixed staff at their house. Yeah? And so we said, okay, let's kick out the museum of our name. Yeah? And even another reason was that our students from information design, nobody of them wants to study exhibition and museum design. No,
because the word museum was so old-fashioned for the young people studying
like
information or communication design.
And so we kicked out, and now it's exhibition design, yeah, because you can do an exhibition, can you also do in a museum. Yeah, and yeah.
Or you can also switch to shop design or stuff like this. Presentation of agencies.
So as I said, museums are not really cool.
You're right.
More in a joke than ever really. Of course that. Any more questions, comments? I would really, really like to thank our guests. Really thank you, Karl, Erika, Kaja, Boštjan.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being so patient, because we stretched our museum tea party in a very long term. And I hope we see you next time.